when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
Jameson Williams has been so impressive these last couple of weeks.
Hello and welcome to the Cover One NFL Draft Weekly Show. I'm one of your two hosts, Rich Haynes. You can find me at Burner Sports on the Twitter, and the man of the hour, or our resident draft expert here at Cover One, is Russell Brown. You can find him at Russ NFL Draft on Twitter, and you know, we are ready to jump into some draft talk. You know, Russ, as the off season is officially here, the Super Bowl, it's over. Fans of teams, not named the Rams, are in various stages of recovery from the 2021 season. But man, right now, hope springs eternal. So we're ready to talk about some draft coverage. But before we get into all that, man, just how you doing on a Thursday night?
I'm doing well, man. I'm excited to talk draft, as people know from the audio podcast, and even through just my 4 or 5 years here at Cover One. They know I'm a Lions fan. It pains me to see Matthew Stafford win a championship with another team and not my team, but also I love to see it because that's my boy. But that's why we do the draft. You're a Browns fan. I'm a Lions fan. I mean, this is why we do this, because we've had so many years of painful football, from winless seasons to making the playoffs to some questionable quarterback stuff. But no, I'm excited, man. I'm happy to have you aboard with me here on the draft show to do a little bit of football stuff and draft stuff. And I appreciate you kind of taking the keys to the car, hosting it, and driving us down the street here as we talk some football.
Yeah, for sure. And right out the gate, we had a comment out there, from Brian, let's go, which is, that's how I feel. Like, let's go, let's turn the page, let's get into, some mock draft talk. But, before we dive into that, for some of the folks that are just joining us and, are going to listen tomorrow on the different networks, maybe just give the people, if you will, just some background on yourself, like how did you get into it? Because you do some pretty cool player breakdowns, and you really get into it. You get into the film, you know what I'm talking about. So maybe talk just a little bit about how you got into it, and maybe your approach as you jump in and kind of prepare these mock drafts.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing the draft for 10, 11 years. It's been something that I've always loved doing. And I did some stuff over at Fansided with NFL mocks for a while. And it was a lot of fun doing that for a season. And during the transition into the summer, Eric Turner reached out to me from Cover One, said, love your work, would love to have you join me. And I've been here ever since. And it's just like home, but from a breakdown perspective, I try to watch as much film as I can on, close to 150 guys. I know realistically I'll never get to 300 guys unless somebody pays me a full-time salary to do this for 14, 15 hours a day, which I have no issue doing. But just, throw me some coin and we'll make it happen. But ultimately, I try to do, close to 150 guys, and I try to break down, anywhere between 3 to 5 games per player, unless I get absolutely hooked on a guy and I'll watch 7 or 8 games just because I love the player. But, I watch different variations of film in the off season, how to get better from offensive line play, defensive line play, things like that. And I try to tie what I learn over the years, from coaching football for over a decade to playing football for 7, 8 years of my life, to everything else, to watching it. And I just try to tie it into the draft and breaking these guys down and grading them out. So, I'll have a draft guide first week, second week of April, somewhere in there. I'm up to 130 players watched. So working through some scouting reports now. And last year we were right around that number. So the number's on. We just got to get the reports finalized and put out, and then put the guide together. And before we know it, it'll be April. So it's fun, man. I love the draft, and it's what I'm passionate about the most.
Yeah, and just one follow-up question there for you, that I think it's important when somebody's coached it, when somebody's played it, to then be breaking down the film. So just real quick, what position did you play when you played?
Well, I've played kind of everything. So like when I was in Little League, I was a left guard for a long time. Then I played tight end and linebacker. And then when I finally played linebacker, that's when I knew I loved playing defense. And then when I got to high school, I played cornerback, not quarterback, but cornerback and wide receiver. And then I played a little bit of like a wing back. And then as time went on, we had an injury on our defensive line. So my defensive coaches at the time were like, "You're fast. Let's put you down on the defensive line." So I played down on the D line, and I was a stand-up edge. And then over time, I kind of transitioned into this linebacker and an odd front of a defense. And I played defense for the entire time. And from a coaching perspective, I've pretty much coached every position at this point. At the high school level, I coached offensive and defensive line. And then I did a little bit of linebackers and co-defensive coordinator stuff for a little bit. And now I'm coaching my son's team, where this past year I was an offensive coordinator. And, I've done a little bit of everything. I'm not the GOAT, but I try to practice and try to get there. So every day get a little better.
All right. Well, last question before we jump on in and dive into your first 1.0, the first mock draft of the 2022 season. As you look back to last year, we've had a year now to kind of digest the first round of 2021 with the different picks. Is there any pick that stood out to you that maybe was your favorite pick, or you feel like you just nailed from an analysis perspective? Just to give us a little bit of flavor of how last year went.
Yeah, I mean, I think from just a first round perspective, I mean, Jamar Chase was definitely somebody that I feel like I kind of hit the nail on the head there. He was somebody that some people were really skeptical of him because of not playing for a year. Was it, 1 year worth of luck with Joe Burrow? Obviously, he goes back into the NFL and plays with Joe Burrow. So it's kind of worked out for him. But I feel like the talent has always been there. And I think with some NFL coaching, when you see what he can do with the ball in his hands, I think he can really go a step further as a player. And I think that's, really showing in this rookie season. So for him to have the season that he had, it makes me feel comfortable in knowing that he was my top wide receiver this past year. I wasn't worried about him not being like an elite separator or even an elite route runner. And I know like in the preseason, a lot of people were writing him off because in the preseason, he was somebody that, had a bunch of drops, was struggling and things like that. But I wasn't too worried about, him and his evaluation. I trusted that whole process. And then just after that, I mean, I will say, I was very much in on Javonte Williams from North Carolina. He was an early draft crush of mine. He went on from, to Denver and kind of shared the backfield, but the future is his there. So I really like his skill set, and I felt like there was a chance he could have been a first-round pick. He went in the second round, but, I think that production's really going to stick out over the next 2 to 3, maybe even 4 or 5 years. So I'd probably go with those two guys, especially for a lot of fantasy football fans out there, and then just obviously just the offensive side of the football.
Yeah, and we'll throw in some fantasy coverage here and there a little bit as we go through some of these picks. And, I can remember back last year talking through, just the training camp sessions with Anthony and Greg on the Cover One Fantasy Show. And we were all in on Jamar, and then we all got a little nervous for a second there, and we should have stuck with our gut. And, some of us still benefited from him fantasy-wise. But, he had a rough couple weeks stretch for a second there. But, yeah, he's been a heck of a talent. So, well, hey, man, why don't we just jump right into it? Now, enough of the pomp and circumstance, as they say, and let's just get right at some of your picks. You did the whole first round, so we're going to run through them. I know we got some chatter already going on. Who the Bills are going to take, wide receivers, corners. We'll obviously get to the Bills here in a little bit, and we'll break down the Bills pick as well as what we think the Browns and the Lions are going to do. But let's jump right in it. Let's kind of look at your first 5. So, who's coming off the board number 1?
Well, with Jacksonville, I mean, it's going to be Evan Neal, offensive tackle from Alabama. He's a talented player, and I get it. Maybe they look at one of the best players in the draft with Aiden Hutchinson or Kayvon Thibodeau or even Kyle Hamilton. But at the end of the day, I mean, you could make a case that Evan Neal is the best player in the draft, maybe the safest player in this draft, because, I mean, it's just a rarity to see a player of his size at 6'7", 350 to come in and be as explosive as he is as an offensive lineman, as athletic as he is. And then just the flexibility from him, you'll see the viral video of him doing the box jump, but it shows on tape when he's down blocking, when he's reach blocking, whatever it is. I mean, he's playing with exceptionally low pad level, and I just love that skill set. I think he could play left side, right side, either way. He's kind of done a little bit of everything for Alabama over the course of time. And I think when you think of Trevor Lawrence, it was a rough rookie year. There were some bright spots, but Urban Meyer didn't help him any. But ultimately, it was just a rough rookie season for him. And I think you need to show confidence in him. And the best way to do that is by filling the void at left tackle. Cam Robinson's going to be gone. He's going to probably hit the market. Could they re-sign him? Sure. But he could hit, some serious money by teams like, Chicago, maybe Atlanta. There's quite a few different teams out there that could take some offensive line help. And Cam Robinson, a team might pay a pretty penny to keep him or bring him in. And with that, I just think with Jacksonville, they can spend their money elsewhere and still draft a very talented offensive tackle in Evan Neal.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Especially trying to protect that, the investment of Trevor Lawrence, even with the coaching change. Doug Peterson's done some nice things with quarterbacks, in his career. So I could certainly see them going offensive line to help protect the quarterback, even if maybe, Evan Neal might not be, consensus, maybe the best talent in the draft, but he's certainly good enough and the best fit, so I can definitely see that pick, being the case there. So let's head to number 2. These are your boys, the Detroit Lions, the Detroit Football Lions. Who are they going to grab at number 2?
Well, I'm not a Michigan fan. I've made that pretty clear over my tenure as the Cover One NFL Draft podcast host throughout the time that I'm a Michigan State guy. I look at my plaques over there on the wall from my degree from them. But I will say Aiden Hutchinson is the best player in the draft, in my opinion. He is just so talented, relentless motor, really good length at 6'5", and he moves well for a player of his size. He's already teased that he's going to go off and have a season or a combine where he's going to have, over 30 reps in the bench press of 225. So again, I love his motor. I love how much pressure he's able to generate this past year. He had 73 total pressures in 2021, 14 total sacks. I think when you look at Detroit, they have struggled to generate pressure, get after the quarterback. They brought in Trey Flowers with Matt Patricia. It hasn't worked out. They could move on from Trey Flowers and save close to $10 million. So when you bring a guy that can translate speed to power as efficiently as Aiden Hutchinson can, as well as how many pass rush moves that he shows and puts on display, I think you can get a really talented player there for Detroit. It's a hometown kid. He understands the problems that have happened with the Detroit Lions, and I think he might take some pride. And I just think when Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes get a chance to meet with him and talk with him, I think they're going to fall in love and say, yeah, this is our guy. This is somebody we want to build our defense and build our culture around. So Hutchinson to the Lions makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and actually, if you look at some of the chat, not to spoil your next pick, but I guess spoiler alert, we have some of this going on right now in the chat. So we'll kind of put a pin in that for a second, because I'm curious your thoughts on comparing Aiden to who's going to come off your board here at number 3. So spoiler alert again there, but at number 3, we'll just put it up there. So maybe compare, in your opinion, or what, I guess, why do you feel Aiden is the choice over Kayvon? And is it, what is different between those two prospects?
There's certainly a lot of potential between both players. They both could have 7 to 8, maybe even more, as far as years of production of double-digit sacks. They could really get after it every single year. I think when you look at Aiden Hutchinson, it's so close, and I'm not a pro comparison guy. So when people say, well, when you watch Jameson Williams, who do you see? Who's your pro comp? I don't have a pro comparison for every player. It's got to be a feel for when I'm watching the tape. And when I watch Hutchinson, I genuinely do see like Nick Bosa 2.0. And when I see something that close and that comparison that close, I have to roll with that. But beyond that, with Kayvon Thibodeau, I could see, a potential Myles Garrett, maybe a poor man's version of it in a sense. But what just separates the two is the overall motor. I think Kayvon at times goes a little hot and cold, while he's incredibly flexible, really athletic for the position, and I still like him. I love the potential that I see with him. I just think his pass rush plan needs a little bit of refinement. I do love the way he drops his shoulder. I do like the explosive first step from him. And I do think when we talk about speed to power, he can translate it, and his game has that ability. But beyond that, I mean, I feel like Detroit with Aiden, it makes so much sense. And that's why Kayvon falls to the spot. If Aiden wasn't here, if Aiden didn't have this season that we just saw, we'd be talking about Kayvon at 2, potentially even at 1, and the Texans going a completely different direction here. But for the Texans, they've been in the bottom 7 over the last 3 seasons, 2 of the last 3 seasons, excuse me, ever since they moved on from Jadeveon Clowney. So they could lose Jacob Martin to free agency this year. So they're going to need to revamp this pass rush, and I think they're going to start with a player like Kayvon Thibodeaux.
Yeah, and a couple comments on both those picks. I think that Aiden makes a ton of sense. To your point, not to gloss over the fact that you mentioned he's the home, kind of the hometown kid. That doesn't matter. I mean, in my opinion, from a fan base perspective, as long as the player fits the position, I think that's a cool thing from a marketing perspective. So I love that
Right.
for the Lions. And then Kayvon, yeah, the Texans, they need talent everywhere. So everyone says, hey, the trenches, right? Build from the lines when you're really kind of doing a full rebuild in a lot of ways. So go out there and get, the pass rusher. Really, the Browns, are in that spot. They obviously disappointed this season, but they're in that spot a few years ago when they were, really an awful football team with an awful culture churning through coaches. And they took, Myles Garrett. He's a huge cornerstone right now. So it could be a similar situation.
Yeah.
For the Texans down there. All right, number 4.
Sure.
Who's up number 4 in your mock?
Yeah, with the New York Jets, man, it's Ikem Ekwonu, offensive tackle from NC State. If Evan Neal was here, obviously that would be the guy, but he's not. And I think you go with the next best offensive tackle. When you look at, their offensive line with the Jets, there's a lot of intrigue with guys like Mekhi Becton and Elijah Vera Tucker. But keep in mind with Becton, he has struggled to stay healthy. I mean, he's missed 14 out of the 29 possible games that he could have played by now. He dislocated his right kneecap this past year and was off for the entire year. So it's one of those things where if he can't stay healthy, you're going to be really in a tough spot in another year. So with so many good offensive tackles, sure, they might wait till maybe, pick 10. Maybe they look at Charles Cross. Maybe Ikem Ekwonu falls to them there. But if he's there, I just think you take him. I think he's a great tone center. He's a one of the best finishers in this draft from a left tackle perspective. Some people like him at guard. I'm not worried about that. I think he's, again, a phenomenal left tackle prospect and just somebody that can transition into a very high caliber starter for a team like the Jets at the next level. And that's the key, building around Zach Wilson, putting things in front of him. And I think that's the key here. Go with Ikem Ekwonu.
Well, we have a lot of Bills fans that likely are tuning in, so I'm sure they're not going to be excited if the Jets can find a cornerstone offensive tackle to protect Zach there. But yeah, obviously, again, makes sense. And one comment I want to throw up here that I kind of missed during your Aiden and Kayvon discussion. Michelle Hollerman agrees. That was pretty much word for word with your analysis. So definitely in agreement there with what you were talking about between the difference between Kayvon, and Aiden.
Yeah, no, and
I
think it goes to show it's not just me either. A lot of people see what I'm seeing as well.
All right, we're going to round out the top 5 here. Who's sitting there at number 5? The New York Football Giants. Who are they taking at 5?
Some people have criticized me for this. Hello, Gregory Thompson. Nice to see you, my friend. A lot of people will probably criticize me on this because I go defense instead of offense. I don't get Daniel Jones some help. And I want to be honest, the only person that can help Daniel Jones is himself. I mean, that guy has to play better at quarterback. That's all there is to it. But beyond that, this team defensively, they need help. I mean, that's what it boils down to. And I know, bringing in Brian Dable, it could change. They might go offensive heavy here, but when you look at Kyle Hamilton, he's 6'4", 220, very rare length for the position, great athleticism, and I think he closes to the football really well. He understands how to utilize his ball skills in the open field, in tight areas on top of receivers and tight ends, and I think he's just really smooth in coverage. And when you look at the Giants, they need to get some playmakers on defense. I mean, there's been the rumors of them possibly moving on from guys like James Bradbury, and if they revamp their defense because Patrick Graham is gone, then they might have to really consider taking stud defenders here at the top of the draft so they can focus on the offensive side of the football later on the second and third day of the draft. So I think here you take one of the best defenders in the draft, especially from the secondary perspective. He's a great safety, and I think he would be just a plus defender for them up in the box, single high, in the slot, wherever you want to play him. He is not turning him into Josh Allen 2.0. Stop it, Craig.
Yeah, Gregory and myself have had some fun discussions from a fantasy perspective on Daniel Jones. Greg likes to think that Daniel's going to be, continue to progress. He can't get off the Daniel Jones train a little bit, which, he shows flashes at times with his legs fantasy-wise. But
ball security, man. Ball security. Yeah, ball security.
Yep. All right, so let's round out your top five one more time. Let's recap it. So you had Evan Neal to the Jaguars, Aiden Hutchinson to the Lions. You had Kayvon to the Texans. You had Ekwonu to the Jets, and you had Kyle Hamilton to the Giants. So that's your top five. And for everybody out there, that's listening, you can go over to cover1.net. You can bring up his mock draft. Go to the website. You can bring it up and kind of look along with us. But certainly. Certainly here Russ is going in more depth in than what he's put out there in that article, which is great to hear. So let's go to the second half of the top 10, starting with the Carolina Panthers, who I think are in an interesting position in a lot of different ways, to be honest. So who do you have the Carolina Panthers taking at number 6?
I mean, the thing that's holding them back the most is the quarterback the quarterback position. They don't have a pick on the second day of the draft. The second and third round picks are gone. They've shown over the last year or so that they're very serious about getting a quarterback. I mean, they wanted to trade for Matthew Stafford. He didn't want to go there. He went to the Rams. They brought in Cam Newton. They traded for Sam Darnold. No matter what, they got to go quarterback here. And the marriage is Kenny Pickett. I mean, you link everything together. I mean, David Tepper, their owner, he's a Pitt grad. Matt Rule he was at Temple and he was recruiting Kenny Pickett at one point. And then he took the Baylor job, and Kenny Pickett stayed close to home and went to Pitt. But with that, I mean, Kenny Pickett's somebody that does remind me a little bit of Derek Carr in a sense. When you watch him move in and out of the pocket, I think it's very comparable. I do like that he is fairly accurate with the football and he can make just about every throw on the field. Arm strength might be somewhat of a concern because, at times when he throws it deep down the field, he might not necessarily drive into those throws as much as you'd like. But ultimately, I mean, the ball does fly out of his hands at times. Simple flick of the wrist. I think timing is the big part that he's just got to improve on. If he can get his timing down, I think it could go a long way. But you put him in an offense with DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey, I mean, there's a lot to like there. And I get it. People are going to say the hand size is too small. I don't care about that stuff. Joe Burrow has small hands. The guy just played in the freaking Super Bowl. That stuff really doesn't matter. If you can throw the football, that's all that matters. If you can move around and avoid pressure, that's all that matters. And Kenny Pickett can do those things. And, he might struggle. He very well could, to that comment. But I think at this point, they need to get the quarterback that maybe is the safest and maybe the best bet in this draft. And I think that player is Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, no, I mean, I watched Pickett a decent amount this past season, and the athleticism there combined with some of the arm talent is definitely intriguing, especially considering the quarterbacks you see in the NFL right now with the Josh Allens and some of these guys that aren't necessarily run first, but it's important to be able to get out of the pocket and make plays with their feet at times. So I think that he can fit that bill a little bit. I don't know that he should be doing fake slides in the NFL, but I digressed a little bit on that one. A little slick move for a second there.
Right.
But yeah, I think Pickett could be a cool pick for the Panthers. And, they definitely need some offensive talent because as much as I like Christian McCaffrey, he can't stay on the field. DJ Moore certainly could use somebody to give him the ball a little bit down there.
Right. Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right. Let's head over to number 7 again, the Giants again. The New York Football Giants with all these picks here in the first round. This one, I believe, is via the Bears. So Giants are up at 7.
Yeah, going back to the defensive side of the football. Like I said, Giants fans are going to tell me I'm crazy, don't know what I'm talking about. The Giants are in a position where they could potentially sign a free agent offensive lineman. I mean, they could do a variety of things. And again, they have picks in the second round where there's a lot of quality interior offensive linemen in this draft. There's some quality day 2 offensive tackles, such as Sean Ryan from UCLA. They could look at one of my guys, Luke Godeke from Central Michigan. There's quite a few different names that they could look at in the second and third rounds of this draft where they can upgrade their offensive line. Now, I'm with you. Charles Cross would be a nice pick here, but I'm going to go with one of my favorite players in the draft, and that's Nakobe Dean, linebacker from Georgia. When you look at the Giants, they have not drafted a linebacker since in the first round since 1984 with Carl Banks. I was not even a thought in 1984. And I will just say, when you look at this, having multiple first round picks, you can change kind of the structure of your defense, and you can put pressure on teams like the Cowboys, the Eagles, Washington in your division and across the NFC. And I mean, Dean is just a talented player all the way across the board. I mean, he's got this aggressive play style, really good range. I love the way he attacks downhill. And the two things that stood out the most to me on the field, one thing was really just his ability to blitz. I love how well he changes direction and can just blitz and get after the quarterback and get in the backfield and be disruptive, but also off the field. Incredibly smart kid. Hasn't had a B since his 8th grade year in high school. He's going to college for his mechanical engineering degree. I think he's already got it, to be completely honest with you. So he's a smart guy off the field, does great things for the community. And when you look at the Giants and trying to build this thing right, these are guys, Kyle Hamilton, Nakobe Dean, these are players you build your team around.
Well, and to your point there, I mean, based on all of the intangibles from a smarts perspective, I mean, that could be huge from running that defense down the line, making the play calls on the field, being that defensive captain at some point. So that intangible is certainly a nice thing to have at the linebacker, position or safety position, but I think traditionally more so at the linebacker position. All right, so the Giants, Nakobe Dean, and again, if you head over to cover1.net, Russ breaks that down a little bit more as well as one of his favorite players. But number 8, the Atlanta Falcons are on the board here in our mock draft.
Yeah, I mean, Malik Willis, quarterback, Liberty. I'm not going to beat around the bush here. Matt Ryan's not playing forever, folks. I mean, the guy's like 38 years old. Arthur Smith is damn near the same age as Matt Ryan, and Arthur Smith's 39. So Arthur Smith's got to prepare for his future as part of the Falcons organization. He doesn't owe anything to Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan really doesn't owe anything to Arthur Smith. However you want to view this, but Malik Willis, local kid, grew up in Atlanta. I think when you look at kind of the hometown story, it's kind of cool. I know I did it with Aiden Hutchinson, but the Falcons have done this before. They took A.J. Terrell a few years ago in the first round. A lot of that was because of COVID. They couldn't travel, and they fell in love with A.J. Terrell and kind of surprised some people by taking him in the first round, but he's turned out to be an absolute stud for him. So the same thing could happen here. They might get to know Malik Willis really well, and that's important when you look at the quarterback position. There's a lot of stuff within his game, a lot of traits and tools that you can get really excited about. Got one of the, probably one of the strongest arms in the draft. His mobility really separates himself from other players. I mean, down in the red zone, the things that you can do with that. But beyond that, I mean, he's got to find ways to throw with a little bit of touch. He really likes to zip the ball in there, and his ball placement can get a little sporadic. But when we talk about quarterbacks sitting behind another quarterback for a year or two, some people say, oh, that doesn't matter. Well, I mean, it mattered for Aaron Rodgers in a sense. He sat behind Brett Favre. Tom Brady sat behind Drew Bledsoe. You look at Patrick Mahomes, he sat behind Alex Smith for a year. Some of these guys, it takes time. And I think with Malik Willis, it's going to take time. He's coming from that small schooler Liberty. Doesn't mean he can't play, but I just think when you think about sitting behind Matt Ryan, that's important. And when you think back to the Senior Bowl, in his interview, he said 3 quarterbacks really stand out. He loves the way Russell Wilson, he plays with the touch and how he throws the football there. Aaron Rodgers, just his complete game and some of his mobility. And then beyond that, Matt Ryan, he loved his anticipation. I just find it odd that he mentions Matt Ryan. Maybe it's because he's an Atlanta kid, but not every quarterback's throwing out Matt Ryan to why they study the game or watch the game. It was just an odd thing that kind of caught my eye. And when I found out he's from Atlanta, I was like, there's something here. It makes sense to me.
Yeah. And, to your point, obviously there's some rumors that maybe the Falcons are going to try to move on from Matt Ryan right away and trade him, but that would really make sense to hang on to Matt Ryan and let him kind of tutor and mentor Malik a little bit from a veteran perspective. So you might be doing a great job there, kind of connecting those dots. I think Matt Ryan gets a little bit of a bad rap for some reason. I don't think he gets. Obviously, he was a really good player, and he's kind of
Yeah.
struggled a little bit in recent years as he's got up in age. But it's not like he's been absolutely terrible or anything. So it's interesting that I don't know, feel like his reputation's taking a little bit of a hit. But yeah, that could be a really nice pairing down there in hot Atlanta. All right. So number 8, of course, that was Malik Willis. Number 8, we did have a comment out there about Brian Dable. Is Brian Dable going defensive with the 2 picks there? And you kind of addressed that a little bit from Pops Mafia, but that will be interesting. If the Giants would go 2 defensive players with Dable being an offensive-minded coach, but he may make that decision because he feels comfortable with the offensive side of the ball and wants to kind of load up his defense. So it's very possible he goes that way as well.
Look at Matt.
So we're down to number 9. Yeah, exactly. Look at Matt Rule. Very, very good.
Yeah. And before I say, that, look at Matt Rule. Every one of his drafts been very defensive heavy. So you can be an offensive minded coach, but you can go defense. But staying on defense here, Denver Broncos, I don't know what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers. This is my assumption that he's going there. Nathaniel Hackett, a lot of things, when you start connecting dots, it just makes sense. And his whole MVP speech, I mean, it just sounded like his time in Green Bay was done. And maybe he goes to Denver. And if they do that, I think the Broncos, they might not even have this pick, but if they do, David Ajabo, edge rusher from Michigan. I love this fit. They moved on from Von Miller. They got some draft picks for it, but Bradley Chubb didn't even have a sack this past year. They need to go out and get somebody that can generate some pressure. And Ojabo, he can do that. I mean, he's going to have to get some refinement as far as in the run game. I mean, he's going to have to get stronger. He's going to have to understand how to fight pressure with pressure, but he's got a plethora of pass rush moves. And he really, for a player of his size, who's not, the same length as Aiden Hutchinson or the same weight or necessarily maybe as strong as him, he does understand how to translate speed to power. You'll see times where he long arms, Penn State offensive tackles and gets into the backfield, and you love seeing that stuff. So with Ajabo, I love the fit in Denver. I think it's a great spot for him. And as they, try to revamp their team and try to make a push in the AFC West, I think Ajabo defensively makes a ton of sense for them.
All right, just keep on rolling. The Broncos, number 9, going defense. To your point, who knows? Maybe that pick goes. They do make a play for Aaron Rodgers, but if they keep it, go some defense there. And then we're to round out your top 10. We have the New York Jets again on the clock. So New York has dominated the top 10.
Yeah, they got this pick from Seattle because of Jamal Adams. And I think one of the big risers throughout the draft process so far, I think that will continue after the combine, pro days, things like that, is Jermaine Johnson, the edge rusher out of Florida State. I mean, he was jacked at 6'5", 259 at the Senior Bowl. And I know he worked with the Lions specifically down there, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Jets took a liking to him and really paid attention to him during practice and the games and during interviews and things like that. When you see a guy that can also, rush with a lot of speed, a lot of power, you get really impressed with that. When you look at Robert Saleh and his defense over the years, he's always had really talented edge rushers in his defense in San Francisco, DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead, Bosa, players like that. I mean, they add pieces up front defensively. And I think when you look at Johnson, I think you can really see that there's a lot of potential there with him. And I think when you put it all together in New York, I think it's going to really work out and really gel for him. So I like the fit. I think it's probably maybe a surprise to some, because some people are saying, in the 30s for Johnson, but I think he's, worthy of that top 15 discussion after the Senior Bowl. You're on mute, Rich.
I wanted to go, into the top 10 a little bit. Thank you for that there, Russell. I want to go in the top 10 pick by pick with you there to get in depth a little bit. I know in future episodes, obviously, as we go through and, mock drafts 2.0 and so on, we'll probably get into a little bit more of the lower picks, but, I think at this point, maybe let's take a look at the next 5 and maybe just rattle them off and then grab a player out of the next 5 that, you think you really want to kind of hit on. So as we're looking at starting at 11 with, I'm going to have a long time for me to get used to the Commanders nickname. Just like as an Indians fan, I'm going to have a hard time with the Guardians for a long time. But we have the Commanders up at 11. So if you want to start there, roll through your next 5 picks, and I'll throw them up on the board.
Yeah, Washington, the Commanders, Charles Cross, offensive tackle out of Mississippi State. 12 with Minnesota. The Vikings, they go Sauce Gardner out of Cincinnati. 13, your Cleveland Browns, they take Garrett Wilson out of Ohio State. Baltimore Ravens at 14 take Derek Stingley Jr. out of LSU, the corner. And then the Eagles, they're at 15, take Chris Olave out of Ohio State. I'll start with my favorite pick out of these 5, and that's Sauce Gardner. I've already written the article about why he's cornerback number 1, why he's CB1. When you look at Minnesota, they've taken some corners over the years and it just hasn't worked out. Jeff Gladney, Mike Hughes, things like that. It's just not necessarily worked out for them. But I think when you look at this one, this one can really turn into a powerful pick for them. I mean, Patrick Peterson's probably gone. They're going to be doing some different things in their secondary, I'm assuming. And I think this is a good start for them because Sauce Gardner's got really great length at 6'3", 200. He understands how to utilize that length through the catch point consistently. I love his athletic ability, really, really fluid lower body. And I think at times, sure, he gets a little grabby, but he's knowledgeable. He understands how to recover. He trusts his athleticism. So I love his skill set, and he's one of my favorite players in this draft. So him at 12 to be the first corner off the board, love it for the Vikings.
And I actually, I watched quite a few Cincy games this year. They were a fun team to pay attention to. You could definitely see his skill set, even just not as somebody that breaks down film, nearly as much as you do, but you can kind of see him translate just on the screen watching the games. I would be remiss to not get into the Browns pick a little bit here. So, obviously you have them going Garrett Wilson out of Ohio State. I think that would make a ton of Browns Twitter extremely happy. We definitely could use talent at the wide receiver position with the, departure of Odell, him wanting out and us, allowing him to get out there and go win a Super Bowl. And then, Jarvis Landry, as you even mentioned, I believe in your article, not sure what's going to happen there. Possible cap casualty if they make the decision to move on from Jarvis. But even if Jarvis stays, they definitely need to add talent to that wide receiver core and try to get Baker some additional weapons. But one thing that, from my perspective as a Browns fan, as the, Kyle Stefanski is, how he values positions, I'm really curious if they actually take a wide receiver at 13, just because Stefanski doesn't tend to value wide receivers, in my opinion, at least, as he should. His offense is not, doesn't fit around that as much. They moved on from Stephon Diggs, the Vikings, when he was a part of that scheme. Obviously, he had a little bit of a falling out with Odell here, in my opinion, not necessarily his fault, but I'm curious. I hope they take a wide receiver. Personally, as a fan, I'm curious to see if that it would be a total Browns move for them to, pass on one of these. I think they're, in my opinion, 5 really good wide receivers here at the top of this draft, and go for a different position. But yes, I'm hoping you're right. I hope Garrett Wilson or one of these wide receivers finds their way to brown and orange.
Yeah, I've talked about it a couple times on the fan down there in Columbus, and on the radio show down there about which wide receiver I would rather have and what would the Browns or Bengals do. And I'll be honest, I'm torn between Olave and Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson's a sneaky good route runner. I don't think it gets talked about enough because so many people focus on his body control and what he does in contested catches. But when you watch him from a talent perspective in the middle of the field, he's just as good as just about anybody else when it comes to running routes. So with these receivers, I'll just say I'm so torn on which one goes first, which one goes last in the first round. I could see Treylon Burks. I could see Drake London. I could see any of these guys. And I did a radio spot in Houston today. I said wide receivers by far the deepest position in this draft, and appreciate the shout out there from Reptile.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that, Reptile. And that's, the potential deepness of the wide receiver class is another reason why I'm like, I don't know, maybe the Browns, they go, hey, we're sitting at 44, right? I think they were sitting at 44, and they go and grab a wide receiver in round 2. They also, I believe, have 2 3s and 2 4s, so they have a lot of ammunition to move around if a receiver starts to fall. But let's go ahead and get with your next set. So we went through Chris Olave at the Eagles at 15. Let's hit 16 through 20.
Yeah, Andrew Booth from Clemson, the corner, going 16 to Philadelphia. Eagles have back-to-back picks, and we'll actually talk about the Eagles again coming up here because they have 3 picks in the top 20, really from 15 to 20. And then 17, Los Angeles Chargers, George Karlaftis, the edge from Purdue. The New Orleans Saints go Desmond Ridder, the quarterback from Cincinnati. The Philadelphia Eagles back on the clock at 19, Tyler Linderbaum out of Iowa, the interior offensive lineman. And then at 20, the Pittsburgh Steelers go Trevor Penning, the offensive tackle from Northern Iowa. So we kind of got Iowa, in a sense, back-to-back picks, Iowa, Northern Iowa, a couple of offensive linemen there. It's hard for me to narrow this down to maybe my favorite pick of the 5. I mean, I'll touch briefly about George Karlaftis for the Chargers. And actually, no, screw that. I'm gonna go New Orleans Saints Desmond Ridder here. I'm sorry. I'm gonna go with the quarterback, and just simply because when you look at the Saints, I don't know how they're going to land a veteran quarterback. They can't roll with Taysom Hill, Ian Book, those guys next year. I mean, I guess they could, but you're pretty much telling the league, hey, we're not expecting to win a lot of games. I mean, they're over $70 million in cap space. They've got to figure the Michael Thomas situation out. Alvin Kamara already had the off the field issue. They're going to probably lose Armstead and Marcus Williams to free agency. There's going to be a lot of stuff going here. And so maybe this isn't the best fit for the player, but Desmond Ridder, I think, is one of those guys that is pro ready, won 44 games in his college career, has, kind of a slight build to him, a thin lower body at 207, but he is 6'4", and he moves well for that 6'4", does a lot of zone read stuff, throws the ball, relatively well in all 3 areas of the field. I think really the biggest issue with him is not so much working through progressions, but more so just ball placement. I mean, he can get a little sporadic outside of the numbers. There's times where he's supposed to lead a receiver and he's behind him. So I think Ridder is somebody, if you needed him to play year 1, it could work out. And I do wonder if you bring in a young quarterback like this, even though much of free agency will be over, maybe though for the offensive side of things, maybe it'll give a boost of confidence to a guy like Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, some of the pieces that you have offensively. And if you do play your cards right, maybe you do clear some of this money, maybe you're able to keep a guy or two, maybe sign another guy, and maybe it won't be so bad. But the quarterback spot, I just have a hard time believing that this team's going to be able to toss $10 to $20 million into that position. So I think quarterback just makes a lot of sense for them here at 18.
Okay. And now, one question I have for you, just, you obviously have the Eagles making all 3 selections. I know you don't have potential trades at this point in any mock drafts, but I mean, do you see the Eagles maybe moving off of one of those picks potentially if the situation is right? And if so, maybe what would they try to go after?
I mean, I really do. I mean, when you look at 15, could they move 15 or 16 because maybe a team like Pittsburgh, let's just say hypothetically Malik Willis is there. Maybe, Pittsburgh's been kind of the team that has been linked to Malik a little bit throughout the Senior Bowl process. So if there is that quarterback, maybe it's Ridder as well. Maybe it's Sam Howell. Maybe a team would be interested in moving up, but also when you look at, teams like the New England Patriots at 21 on the outside, you never know what they're going to do. If there's a defensive player that they really like or an offensive lineman they really like, I could see them moving up. I don't know necessarily what it would cost, but ultimately I could see, when you see Chris Olave there at 15, or even if you want to say it's pick 16, however you want to shape that up. I mean, if Philly moves back to somewhere in the 20s, they still might be able to land Chris Olave, or they still might be able to land a Drake London or somebody else. So, and you can make the same case with Andrew Booth. If they don't go that route, they could move back to, and you just popped up from Pop's Mafia here, Trent McDuffie from Washington or Roger McCreary from Auburn. They could very well look at going that route if they move back. So I think Philly they have so much ammunition in this draft and next year's draft that they could be very active on the opening night of the draft.
Yeah, and that's that comment by Pops is a good transition as we head into the next 5 picks, as Bills is sitting there at 25. So Pops will kind of get to that comment here in a moment, but let's go ahead and run down. And we ended with the Steelers taking Trevor Penning, tackle from Northern Iowa. So let's go ahead and do the next 5 from the Patriots on down to the Bills. Oh. No, I think you're on mute there, Russell.
Oh, no, I'm on mute. Unprofessional. Look at that.
It's okay. No, you know what? You just didn't want to make me feel bad, so I appreciate that. And now we both have one.
Yeah, no. So in New England at 21, I'm going Devin Lloyd, linebacker out of Utah. You could make a case for Devin Lloyd being a top 10, top 15 player. Just one of those things that he falls to 21. And with New England, it's such a wild card. But 22, Las Vegas Raiders, Jordan Davis from Georgia, the defensive tackle. Arizona Cardinals at 23, Zion Johnson, interior offensive lineman from Boston College. Then you look at 24 with the Dallas Cowboys, Kenyon Green, interior offensive lineman from Texas A&M. And then at 25, the Buffalo Bills, Jamison Williams, wide receiver out of Alabama. And I'm assuming because we have so many Bills fans in our chat and in part of Cover One, I'm assuming I'm going to have to go there into that detail.
Let's definitely start. Yeah, let's definitely start with 25 because I want to hear why we're going wide receiver. Not that I'm a Bills. I feel sometimes like I'm a Bills fan. Now I'm on Cover One so much. Like I just said, we are going 25 when I don't know. I'm a Browns fan, but yeah, what's going on with the Buffalo Bills taking Jameson?
Yeah, I mean, with Jamison Williams, he falls here to 25. Again, like I said, he could be the first receiver. These receivers could go any way. But I think maybe with the torn ACL, maybe some teams might be a little skeptical, especially now that you just saw what happened to Odell Beckham Jr. now twice in back-to-back seasons. So maybe there's a chance that he falls a little bit. But when you look at with Buffalo, I wouldn't be bringing back Cole Beasley. I wouldn't be bringing back Emmanuel Sanders if it was me. I'd be moving forward with Gabriel Davis after a 200-yard, 4-touchdown playoff performance. And then obviously Stephon Diggs. And with these receivers, I'm going to go out and get myself a true deep threat with Jamison Williams. And you see how fast he is. He brings such a special team's feel to him as far as what he can do as a gunner, as a return man. I love his route running ability. I love his tracking ability as well. And I just think he's such a talented player. You put him in an offense with Josh Allen and, Brian Dable, we talked about it earlier, is going to the Giants. This offense might struggle a little bit. It might be better. I don't know. But to make it better, to help any way you can, I think you add a playmaker here. As much as I love the thought of a cornerback for them, I just think you go with the wide receiver, and that player would be Jamison Williams if I could pick him.
And, you have some interesting comments. I'll throw a couple up there. Obviously, I think, Bills Mafia, they had concerns about their offensive line throughout the season, protecting Josh, but even more so, at least in my opinion, not even protecting Josh because he can get out. He's a magician, right? He can get out a lot of situations on his own, but just in that run game, they didn't really have that push in the run game quite a bit from an offensive line perspective. There's a lot of talk about corners, so let's throw up a couple comments here and let you, kind of address them. Pop Mafia. Will corner McDuffie or McCreary make it to the Bills? I believe McCreary definitely, obviously, he's later in your mock, but maybe comment on that, and then we can get into the offensive line, why they may not choose to go there.
Yeah, well, I mean, with the offensive line, I'll start there because I think with them, I mean, it's one of those things. They've spent so much time putting the resources in there, and when I got to this spot, Zion Johnson was gone, Trevor Penning was gone. I'm not really comfortable with taking an offensive lineman here. I mean, last year it felt like you kind of reached in a sense, going back-to-back defensive ends and then back-to-back offensive linemen. So I think I'm not going to reach. I'm not going to force their hand, like go and take. I love the kid, but I'm not going to take Lacita Smith at 25 if I could potentially get him at, pick 60 or whatever their second round pick is. Just not going to do that. So really at the cornerback spot, I think it's more so which one do I value more? And I have to view it from the Bills' perspective. I feel like this team with two receivers potentially hitting the market, there's going to be just the value to go get one of those guys first. And again, you can find good value in the second, third, fourth round potentially. But when you see a playmaker like this available, I think you just have to pull the trigger on it. Now, McDuffie could be there. McCreary could be there. They both could be gone because you never know what's going to happen on draft day. But I do know some people that really like McDuffie in the top 15 and the top 20 because of, one, how athletic he is. He's going to test really well at the combine. He does a really good job in the open field, closes quickly. I'm a fan of him. And with Roger McCreary, I love how fluid he is. I mean, his lower body is super fluid. I mean, it's like butter. And you watch him out there on the field at the Senior Bowl, and he just does a great job moving. He does a great job, competing. And I think either one would be fine fits. Don't get me wrong, but just from the perspective of this mock draft, when I was looking at it, I was like, man, I have Jameson Williams falling to their lap. Somebody's gonna roast me for this, because if I go corner, why didn't you take Jameson? If I take Jameson, why didn't you go corner? So it's a lose-lose situation with mock drafts. But it's just one of those things. And to Nick's question right there, what about Kyler Gordon? Love Kyler Gordon. Would love to see him in Honolulu Blue at pick 32 or pick 34, please. I love him. I think he's one of my sleeper picks as far as draft crushes. I think somebody that could really go and do a great job at the next level.
All right. Excellent stuff there, Russell. So, we just ended with the Bills with Jameson at 25. Why don't we just take it home, name off, 26 through 32 in the first round of your mock draft 1.0, and then we can get into a couple of these picks to bring it home tonight on our first NFL Draft Weekly episode.
Yeah, so with the Tennessee Titans, surprise at pick 26, Matt Corral, quarterback, Ole Miss. There's got to be a surprise on draft day. I mean, there just has to be. And I think if there is, I think it's going to be potentially the Tennessee Titans. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Ryan Tannehill, you can say he's good, you can say he's bad. I don't think he's great by any means. Is he okay? Sure, we can call it that. He's okay. Okay is not going to be good enough to get this team where they want to be. And sure, an unhealthy Derrick Henry didn't help down the stretch, but with Matt Corral, they can go out and get this guy and have him learn this offense, help with some of his reads, help get off the one read offense that he's ran at Ole Miss. And I love this pick, and I had to go into detail about it because it's such a surprise, probably for some people, to see a quarterback here. But then Tampa Bay at 27 to Marvin Leal, the defensive tackle out of Texas A&M. At pick 28, the Green Bay Packers, they get Treylon Burks, the wide receiver out of Arkansas. We'll see what happens with Aaron Rodgers there. 29 with the Miami Dolphins. They have this pick from San Francisco. It's Drake London, the receiver from USC. And then Kansas City at 30. I love this fit, and I know Bills fans are going to hate me for it. Roger McCreary out of Auburn, the cornerback. I just love this fit, and I think it's a really good spot for him. Cincinnati Bengals at 31. I know I said I don't see an offensive lineman really for a team like the Bills at 25, but for the Bengals, it doesn't matter. They need as many offensive linemen as they can get. You cannot have your quarterback sacked 70 times between the regular season and the playoffs. Daniel Falele out of Minnesota, the offensive tackle, and I'm sure I butchered the name like I always do. But I think you can just put him at right tackle, maybe look at him at guard, and then my Detroit Lions to close it out for the first time ever at pick 32. Actually, like the second time since like 1989 or whatever it is. But Jahan Dotson, wide receiver from Penn State. And that was not even a first round pick back in the 80s. It was a second rounder. But yeah, with this one, Jahan Dotson, wide receiver from Penn State, they've got to add another playmaker to this offense. If they don't bring back Josh Reynolds, I mean, you just don't know what they're going to do. But regardless, you got to put some weapons in this offense. It's so bad.
Yeah, I do want to go back for a second because we're getting some questions on the Bills pick, and then we'll get back into the last few picks here in round one. So we have a question out here from Nick. Do you envision any other receiver that you'd pick over a cornerback or interior line for the Bills if one were there instead of Jameis?
Well, does he mean, Nick, do you mean interior offensive lineman or interior defensive lineman? Because I think you also had, there was a question about Devontae Wyatt. So I thought maybe that you meant IDL instead of IOL. I don't know. But either way, do I envision another receiver that I'd pick over a cornerback for the Bills? I mean, honestly, I would probably take just about any of the receivers that I just listed, honestly. I love the thought of taking one of those guys because I think all of these guys are worthy of that first round conversation. So if you brought in Treylon Burks, I love that fit because he can do a bunch of stuff after the catch, really big bodied receiver, has the speed. I love the thought of Drake London because he's got that basketball background. You have him down in the red zone, kind of has that Mike Williams or Mike Evans type of play style to him. I think relatively comparable to Mike Evans. Jahan Dotson could play him in the slot, really shifty after the catch. And of course, Jameson Williams, I think you can play him all over. So I love the thought of just making your offense better. But if they went with a cornerback, like I said, I think McDuffie, Gordon, or McCreary would all make sense. They could also look at Kaiir Elam out of Florida. I think he's more of a second rounder. We'll see. And then if they did go interior offensive line, I mean, it would have to be, Zion Johnson. Maybe it's Darian Kennard from Kentucky. Maybe it's Daniel Falele out of Minnesota. But with Kennard, he reminds me a little bit of Cody Ford. I don't know how Bills fans will take that, but that's kind of who he reminds me of. So again, I just think when you talk upside and what helps your offense the most, I think you go grab the playmaker.
That's excellent stuff there, Russ. Good breakdown. And then, Pops Mafia, one more question here, which will be a teaser. So, Pops, who do we see the Bills taking around to? Well, you know what, Pops? Stay tuned to future articles potentially from Russ on cover1.net and maybe, future episodes as we dig deeper into the draft. Today we're going to just concentrate here on round one. But love the interaction from you today, Pops, and all the comments really that have been out there in the chat. It's been nice to see the interaction on there. But if we go back to the end of round one, just for a minute to kind of wrap it up, just to recap it again, you had Matt Corral going to the Titans, which I think is an interesting, that's interesting. Everything you said there as far as, with Ryan Tannehill, is he really getting the job done or not in Tennessee? Do they maybe want to make a change, or potentially at least, put an option behind Ryan for a season? I think that could be interesting. DeMarvin Leal, Trayvon Burks, Drake London, who I personally like both of those guys for the Browns if they're able to not take a pick at 13, not take Garrett Wilson at 13, and maybe have one of those guys slide a little bit to the top of round 2 and then move back up. I kind of want the Browns to get a big wide receiver, not that Garrett's small by any means, but I would love to have a little bit of a bigger wide receiver within that system. Roger McCreary, who you spoke quite a bit on. Yeah, and as a Bills fan and even a Brown fan, if we can maybe contend again, don't love seeing defensive players go to the Chiefs because that's kind of their weak spot right now. And then we rounded out with Bengals, Lions, going another wide receiver with the Lions there. So, is there any other player there in the last few picks that you want to touch on here before we wrap it up for our first episode here of Cover One NFL Draft Weekly?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go with Treylon Burks to the Packers. Obviously, you don't know what direction they're going to go with Aaron Rodgers, what's going to happen with Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams, I've often thought it would be awesome to see him in a team like the Raiders, being reunited with Derek Carr from college and things like that. But if he stays, he probably would play on the franchise tag. Again, we'll see how it goes. But Treylon Burks, put him in that offense, man. Like I said, size, speed, what he can do after the catch. He can play in the slot. He can play in the backfield. He does so many different things for that Arkansas offense that I think Matt LaFleur would really have a field day with him. So we'll see what happens there. But again, he could be the guy at 13 for your Cleveland Browns, to be completely honest. He could be the guy for the Jets at 10. I mean, there's so many possibilities for these receivers. We could see easily 5 or 6 of these guys in the first round, maybe 7. I mean, you never even know. I don't even know how many I have in the first round, but we could see quite a few. I will say real quick to Lego My Ego, he's talking about Daxton Hill in the first round. That's a possibility. That's a good fit. The Daxton Hill safety pick to play with the Kansas City Chiefs. But the key is, Honey Badger has to come back. I mean, that's just the key. He's got to re-sign with that team. Could they do it? Absolutely. I love that you have faith in your Kansas City Chiefs to get it done, but don't get too hyped up on that. And thanks for Pops Mafia. Hit that like button. Great show. Appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, Pops Mafia, appreciate that. For everybody out there, really, this is at least myself and Russell's first go at an NFL draft coverage show, going a little bit more in depth. We want to try to be here with you weekly, leading up to the actual draft there at the end of April. I'm sure we'll get into round 2 and maybe even round 3. I'm sure Russell will be updating his mock drafts. We'll talk about movement, probably do some more in-depth player profiles, all that kind of stuff. Answer all of your questions. So yes, please go out there and hit that like button. We certainly would appreciate it. It will help us, get a little more traction out there in the digital space as we try to get our name out there from a draft coverage perspective. But as you can tell, listen to this whole episode, Russell knows what he's talking about. He does the homework. He can sit here and talk about every single player off the cuff and really just get at it. And he makes some very great comments. So, Russell, it's been a pleasure here for our first episode of the Cover One NFL Draft Weekly. Any closing comments, my friend?
Yeah, no, appreciate it. I'll answer one last question there from Matt Rattle. How much does the combine change players' draft positions, or are most teams set on their boards by then? I think most teams are finalizing boards by then, and at least really shaping it out to what the outline looks like. And I think more so if any interview stands out, they might move up a player to a certain spot and try to figure out where they could potentially land that guy or how they could get it or get that guy on their team. So it's hard to say. I mean, I'm not in an NFL draft room. I'm just in my office. So I just go off of what I think on a player and things like that. But from things I've heard, some boards aren't necessarily like set in stone, but it's really like outlined. They have really what they envision of how it's going to be. And then they just kind of take, they take the interview process there at the combine and just try to finalize it the best that they can. But no, I mean, this was a great show. It's always fun. Really appreciate the interaction. We'll keep doing this between now and the draft hopefully every Thursday around the same time, 7:30 p.m. or 8 o'clock p.m. Around that time. Just to kind of maybe do some Q&A stuff, talk a couple prospects. It's going to be a lot of fun. And thank you, Reptile, for the comment. Thank you to Lego My Ego for subbing to us and everything. Again, there's a lot of great stuff. You guys can find the Cover One NFL Draft podcast on Spotify, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, literally wherever you get your podcast. You can find it, rate, review, and subscribe. And of course, as the ticker's been going by, you can find Rich and I on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft. That's me at Burn River Sports. Find us, smash that follow button. It's been a lot of fun, Rich. I look forward to doing it again next week.
Hell yeah, brother. Well, it's been a great time. Again, thanks for the chat. And that's it for the first episode, Cover One NFL Draft Weekly. We will see you guys next week. We are out of here.